Only legitimate grandkids get a slice of the cake, my father smirked. My daughter lowered her plate. My husband looked at my parents, then at our child, and with zero warning tapped his glass, stood up and said something that made everyone turn pale. We were 15 minutes into what should have been a harmless family dinner when my father said it. Right after the roast came out and someone made a lazy comment about the gravy being too thick. The kind of conversation where no one really listens but everyone nods anyway just to keep the peace. That fake peace. My daughter was sitting next to me, swinging her legs, one shoe half off. She'd waited all night for dessert because she'd seen the cake box when we arrived and whispered to me, "Chocolate?" like it was a secret code. So when my cousin brought it out and started cutting slices, she reached forward with both hands like a 4-year-old does, completely unaware that adults were about to ruin the moment. She got a small piece, balanced it on her plate like treasure, smiled. And then my father, sipping his wine with that self-satisfied smirk I grew up hating but learned to ignore, said it out loud. Loud enough for everyone to hear. Only legitimate grandkids get a slice of the cake. The room didn't go silent immediately. There were a couple awkward chuckles, someone cleared their throat. It took a second for the words to land. But they landed. Right in front of a little girl holding a fork and trying to figure out why no one else was smiling anymore. I looked at my mom. She didn't even blink. Like she'd heard it before and agreed. Like it was obvious. My brother suddenly got real interested in his phone. My cousins stared at their plates. And my husband, he just stared at my parents. Then he stood up. Not slowly. Not dramatically. Just like he'd had enough. He tapped his glass once with the handle of his fork. The sound echoed too loud for such a small gesture. And then he said it. "If you don't consider my daughter your granddaughter, then you're no longer part of this family's business. And if you're wondering if that includes the money you've been receiving weekly, yeah, that ends tonight." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My mom looked up like she was about to say something, but he cut her off before she could open her mouth. "I'm not going to stand here and watch you humiliate a child. You've been pretending for long enough. You don't love her. You've made that clear. So you don't get to benefit from us anymore." Then he sat down. Poured himself some water. Calm as hell. And for the first time in my life, my father had nothing to say. I wish I could say that moment was freeing or powerful. But mostly it felt like something broke. Something I'd been duct taping together for years. I'd made excuses for them, defended them to my husband, told him they'd come around. But they never did. They never would. They never saw my daughter as mine. They barely saw her at all. And for what? Biology? When I married my husband, I didn't do it for some fantasy. I did it because I loved him. And I loved her. It wasn't complicated. Until my parents made it that way. What they didn't know was that the $700 they'd been getting every week wasn't from some mystery account. It was from me. Or more accurately, from my husband through me. He never minded. Never questioned it. I told him they were struggling and he just said, "Do what you need to do." They never thanked him. Never once acknowledged it. They just expected it. Like they were owed. Well, now they weren't. After the dinner, I put my daughter in the back seat and strapped her in. She was sleepy by then, not really understanding what had happened. I kissed her forehead and told her I was proud of her. When we got home, I poured a glass of wine and sat in silence. I knew my phone would buzz. That there'd be angry messages. Calls. Accusations. They'd say I was ungrateful. That I'd betrayed them. That I'd let my husband control me. But the truth was they'd never respected me. Not as a mother, not as a wife, not as a person. And now they were about to learn what it meant to lose the one person who kept throwing them a lifeline. The messages started before we even pulled into our driveway. First came the predictable outrage from my mother. "So now your husband makes decisions for both of you? You let him embarrass us in front of everyone." Then another a few minutes later. "You really think cutting off your parents makes you a hero? It just proves how far gone you are." My father didn't waste time either. "You owe us more than you realize." And then the real gem. "We'll talk soon. Just you and us." Without him in your ear. I stared at the phone in my hand, then put it face down on the kitchen counter and didn't pick it up again that night. My daughter was asleep within 10 minutes of getting home. She had no idea what any of it meant, but even at 4 she could feel something was wrong. My husband didn't say anything while he tucked her in. When he came back downstairs, he poured us both a drink and sat beside me in silence. We didn't need to talk about it. It was already decided. What my parents didn't know was that I'd already stopped the auto payment before dessert was even finished. My hands were shaking under the table while I logged in on my phone, canceled the transfer and stared at the confirmation screen like it would change something about how I felt. It didn't. I thought maybe they'd cool off after a few days. Maybe they'd realize they went too far and apologize, or at least back down long enough to pretend they had. But no. By Monday they switched tactics. The emails started pouring in. My mom tried the soft approach first. Subject: let's not throw away family. Then another one, we're still your parents. And then this line that stuck with me for days. You're not her real mother. You shouldn't be pretending you are. That's when something inside me cracked. My father followed up with a longer one, full of phrases like betrayal, bloodline, and responsibility. He ended it with a threat, though he tried to dress it up. Said something about things getting difficult if I didn't fix this. I blocked their numbers, deleted the emails, but not before forwarding them all to my husband, just so he'd understand exactly what we were dealing with. 2 days later, I got a message from the front desk at his office. Your father came in and asked to speak to your husband. He said it was urgent family business. Security had to escort him out. Apparently, he didn't yell or push anyone. He just made a scene by acting like he belonged there, telling the receptionist he was family. When she asked what the meeting was about, he said, "He'll know. It's about the money." My husband texted me just one thing after that. "He's not coming near my building again. I already told security." That night, I sat in the backyard alone and thought about the version of me that would have apologized for all this. The one who would have called them up and begged them to just accept my daughter even a little. But that version of me was long gone. They didn't just insult my child. They humiliated her. A 4-year-old. They didn't whisper it behind closed doors or vent to a therapist. They said it with cake on the table and 20 people in the room. They wanted a public win. They got a public fallout. The worst part, they thought they could control the outcome. That if they just kicked up enough noise, I'd bend. That I'd be so afraid of breaking the illusion of family, I'd do whatever it took to keep them quiet. But the illusion's already broken. Then my cousin Josh called. He sounded hesitant, like he didn't want to get involved but also couldn't stay out of it. He said, "Look, I thought you should know. Your mom's telling people your husband made you block them. That he's controlling you. That he's cutting off the money to isolate you. She even told Aunt Marie he's abusive." I sat there quiet. I let him finish. Thanked him. Then I hung up. The shift wasn't sudden. It was slow. But in that moment it finalized. This wasn't about money anymore. Or even respect. This was war. And they made the first move. It started the way it always does with them. Quiet, manipulative, and calculated to sound innocent. First, a voicemail from my mom. Her voice was low, sweet, fake. "I think we all said things we didn't mean. It's time to move past it. Let's get back to normal. Call me." Then an email followed. The subject line read, "Rebuilding Trust." It was 2 paragraphs of half apologies, most of which blamed my husband for turning me against them. She said they were willing to let go of the drama if I was ready to admit that the dinner had gotten out of hand. She said I should consider how much they've done for me and how I'd changed since the wedding. Changed? I had changed. I'd grown a spine. That's what they couldn't stand. After 2 weeks of silence from me, the tone flipped. The messages turned cold, aggressive. One came from my father, a real masterpiece of ego. He claimed that cutting them off financially was reckless, that I had a moral debt to them for raising me, and that they were now in danger of losing their home because of my emotional outburst. He wrote, "You were nobody before us. Remember that." Then near the bottom of the email, a line that didn't sit right. "Don't force us to come for what we're owed." It wasn't clear what that meant. Property, money, my daughter. That was the thing about my parents. They were never direct. They liked their threats with just enough vagueness to keep you guessing. To keep you scared. I forwarded the email to my husband, and for the first time since the dinner I saw something different in his face. He wasn't angry. He was focused. Calm but sharp. He said one thing. "Let's make sure they can't touch anything." Over the next 48 hours we moved fast. Our financial advisor reviewed every account. Anything I'd ever co-signed we closed or transferred. I pulled my name off the shared utilities I'd stupidly helped them get approved for when their credit was shot. The shared grocery card. Cancelled. The streaming services they'd been using on our accounts? Logged out and locked down. Then I called the lawyer. Not because I wanted to start a legal war, but because I wanted documentation. A clear trail. Just in case. 3 days later the doorbell rang. A woman stood there holding a clipboard and wearing a badge. Child Protective Services. She said someone had filed an anonymous report claiming our daughter was living in an unstable environment. That her biological mother had passed and the woman raising her now, me, was not legally fit. That the father might be manipulative and financially abusive. She used those words exactly. Words I had read in my parents' emails. I let her in. There was nothing to hide. She walked through our kitchen, peeked into the living room. Our daughter was coloring at the table, humming to herself. She smiled at the woman, held up her drawing of a blue giraffe and said, "This is for mommy." The CPS worker's eyes shifted to me. She nodded, scribbled something down, asked a few basic questions and left. She apologized, unofficially of course, and told me this kind of thing happens when people feel like they've lost control. She didn't say it, but I knew what she meant. My parents had made the call. They weaponized a government agency against a child. They crossed a line I didn't think even they would go near. That night, I sat on the floor in my daughter's room watching her sleep. Her stuffed giraffe tucked under her chin, cheeks soft and peaceful. I knew what I had to do. I didn't just block their numbers. I deleted every photo, every text, every trace of them. I scrubbed them from my life like mold. My husband changed the home security codes. We set up cameras at every entry point. I made sure the daycare had updated emergency contacts, with instructions that my parents were not allowed anywhere near her. Then I called the lawyer again. I want a cease and desist. If they try anything else, I want it on record. I don't want them near my daughter. Ever. He didn't even hesitate. They're going to lose their minds, he said. I told him I was counting on it. They wanted back in. Not because they cared. Not because they had any love for my daughter or me. They wanted access, control, money, power. But this time I let them drown in the silence they created. I gave them exactly what they earned. Nothing. 2 weeks passed. No emails. No voicemails. No CPS visits. It felt too quiet. Like the part in the movie right before everything goes wrong. My husband and I were starting to breathe again. We took our daughter to a fall festival in town. She wore a tiny hoodie with ears on the hood and picked out a pumpkin half her size. We laughed, we took pictures, we tried to remember what life was like before all the noise. That night when I tucked her in, she asked why we hadn't gone to Grandma and Grandpa's house in a while. I told her gently that sometimes grown-ups forget how to be kind, and when that happens it's better to give them space. She nodded and whispered, "Okay, Mommy." Then she fell asleep with her giraffe. The next day my brother called. I hadn't spoken to him in over a month. He always kept his head down when it came to family drama, never picked a side, never made waves. So I didn't expect the first thing out of his mouth to be, "I think Mom and Dad are planning something." He wasn't calling to reconcile. He sounded afraid. He said they were telling people they were going to fix the situation before the holidays. That they were making financial arrangements to reassert their rights over the family business. He said he overheard my father talking to an attorney on speakerphone, something about probate leverage and biological legitimacy. I asked him what that meant. He didn't know. But then he said something else. Dad told Uncle Ray he might have a way to undo what happened at the dinner. He said you're only the face of the business now. That your husband is the one with the real control. And that if he pushes hard enough he can still get back in. Thanked him. He said, "Don't tell them I called. Please." After I hung up I sat there for a long time. Not scared. Not angry. Just stunned. They weren't letting go. They were escalating. That night my husband and I pulled out the box. It was a fireproof locked container in the back of our closet. Inside were documents, shareholder agreements, power of attorney paperwork, even the formal adoption papers we'd filed the month after we got married. We hadn't told many people about the adoption. It had been a quiet process. The original birth certificate still had her mother's name, and we hadn't changed it out of respect. But legally on every relevant line I was her mother. No one could change that. Not even my parents. The next day our lawyer delivered the cease and desist order. It was sent to my parents by courier. My father signed for it himself. 2 hours later I got a notification from the security system. There was movement at the front of our house. I pulled up the camera feed. It was my father, standing just outside the gate, holding an envelope. He didn't say anything. He didn't press the doorbell. He just placed the envelope on the gate post and walked away. Inside was a letter. Typed, formal, and disgusting. He claimed that my daughter was not my real child, and therefore had no legal connection to the family name. He said my husband had manipulated me into a position of compliance, and that my own bloodline was now at risk. He finished with this line, "We are prepared to challenge the legitimacy of your role as a mother, if you force our hand." That was the moment I decided they were done. Completely. Forever. But I didn't just block them. I didn't just file more paperwork. I took it one step further. My husband and I called a meeting with the board of the family business, a company my parents had helped start decades ago, but which we now controlled entirely. My father was technically still listed as honorary founder, a meaningless title with no actual stake. That afternoon we removed the title permanently. Legally, publicly, and with a unanimous vote. We changed the locks on the office building. Had a statement drafted for employees, clarifying the separation. And then we made one final change. We renamed the company. We named it after our daughter. Her middle name actually. Quiet. Elegant. Powerful. The name was printed on the door within a week. The first time my father saw it, he showed up again. This time at the office. But he didn't get past the lobby. And this time he wasn't escorted out. He was ignored. No one even acknowledged him. Guess he was nobody now. After we renamed the company, there was a lull. Like the eye of a storm. I knew it wouldn't last. The silence didn't feel like surrender. It felt like strategy. A week passed, maybe 9 days, before things started going sideways again. Quiet at first, emails from vendors asking if there had been a change in leadership. One even said they received a call from someone claiming to be the founder, warning them that the business was in dispute and not to trust any new agreements without his signature. We knew exactly who it was. He used the title we had stripped from him weeks ago. Founder. Never mind that he hadn't lifted a finger in over 10 years. He clung to that title like it meant something more than it ever did. When we reached out to clarify with each vendor, the story unraveled fast. My father had contacted multiple people tied to the company, clients, old suppliers, even former employees, telling them there was fraud, that I was mentally unstable, and that my husband was manipulating everything behind the scenes. It was character assassination, plain and simple. But the next blow didn't come through business. It came through my daughter. One morning, just as I was about to drive her to daycare, the director called. She said 2 people had shown up asking to pick up my daughter. A man and a woman. Said they were her grandparents and that I had given permission. Thankfully, they weren't on the release list and were immediately turned away. But the director sounded shaken. She wasn't even here today, she said. They didn't know that. They thought she'd be waiting. I hung up and called our lawyer before I could even finish tying my shoes. That was no longer petty drama. That was interference. That was real. By that afternoon, we had a formal no-contact order filed. Copies sent to the daycare, my daughter's pediatrician, our home security company. We made sure there was legal language in place that if either of them came near her again, they'd be dealing with police, not lawyers. My husband stayed calm. But he changed every lock in the house that night anyway. Then came the final move. We were served with legal documents 2 days later. My parents were suing us. Not for custody. Not for defamation. But for emotional and financial damages. The basis of their claim? That I had abandoned my duties as a daughter, that the public removal of their names from the business caused irreparable humiliation, and that the $700 weekly payments had established a dependency that we had unlawfully severed. I laughed when I read the part where they wrote that I had cut off their lifeline out of spite. They thought that after everything, the CPS report, the daycare stunt, the slander, they could still use the courts to get something out of us. Our lawyer handled it fast. There was no merit. It was thrown out before it even reached a hearing. But it made something crystal clear. They were never going to stop. They weren't trying to fix anything. They weren't trying to heal. They were trying to win something. Anything. Money. Power. Control. Even just attention. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I told the rest of the family everything. I didn't do it online. I didn't post anything dramatic. I organized a small gathering at a community space. No pressure. Just a quiet note to everyone who had ever asked why I was distant from my parents. Most of them came. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even my brother who had stopped responding after warning me earlier. I brought everything. The emails. The cease and desist. The letter they left on our gate. The daycare report. Even the footage from our security camera. I didn't rant. I didn't cry. I just let the truth speak. When I was done, I said this. I'm not asking you to hate them, but I am asking you to stop asking me to forgive them. I'm done. My daughter is not a pawn. My marriage is not up for negotiation. And my peace is not a gift they get to borrow. I walked out before anyone could respond. Later that night, my brother texted me. Just 2 words. About time. The next morning, I woke up to 5 missed calls from my mother. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I deleted them before they finished downloading. Then I blocked every number they'd ever used. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel triumphant. But I felt clean. And for the first time in years, I didn't look over my shoulder. It's been 4 months now. 4 months since I blocked their numbers, cut off the last rope that tied me to people who only knew how to take. 4 months of silence, peace, and rebuilding. I won't pretend it's been perfect. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, I still think about them. Not with longing, not even with love. Just a strange emptiness, like you'd feel when realizing a place you used to visit doesn't exist anymore. Some nights I'll remember how my dad used to bring me back candy from the gas station when I was little, or how my mom used to hum while doing the dishes. The soft things. The things that make it harder to believe they became who they are now. But then I remember a 4-year-old holding a fork and staring at a plate of cake she was told she didn't deserve. And that's when the ache disappears. Every time. I've heard from a few relatives. My brother still keeps me updated, though carefully. He says our parents haven't stopped trying to spin their version of the story. How I turned on them, how my husband manipulated me, how they were forced out of their own family business. They leave out the part where they humiliated a child, filed a false CPS report, and tried to show up at a daycare. My mom even tried sending a birthday card last month. He gave it to a mutual friend who brought it to my brother. Inside was a $50 bill and a note that said, "From Grandma. Always here if you need us." I never saw it. My brother threw it away before I could. He told me, "They're not done. They just don't know they've already lost." And that's the truth. They lost. Not just access to money or control over the business. They lost me. The daughter who used to twist herself in knots to make them proud. The woman who once believed that loyalty meant sacrifice, even if it cost her her peace. They'll never meet the woman I became the day I chose to protect my child instead of preserve their pride. And I finally understand now. Family is not blood. It's not obligation. It's not keeping secrets to avoid conflict. Family is who stays when things fall apart. Who builds with you. Who puts your child first without being asked. My husband never asked me to choose. He just waited. Quietly, patiently, while I dragged myself through the guilt, the confusion, the grief of realizing my parents never actually saw me. Not as a mother, not even as a person. And my daughter? She keeps drawing those same pictures. One she taped to the fridge just last week had 3 stick figures. A tall one with glasses, a smaller one with long brown hair, and a tiny one with a pink dress. Above it, in her messy handwriting, it said, "My family. No one missing. Not a single spot saved." That's when I knew, I didn't just protect her. I protected us. I ended a cycle she'll never have to live through. And that's the legacy I'll take over anything my parents ever gave me. They've tried to come back in. They've tried everything. But there's nothing left to unlock. Every door is closed. Every number blocked. Every lie exposed. I didn't want it to end this way. But I'm not sorry it did. Because I lost my parents. But I found my voice. I found my peace. I found the life I want for my daughter. And that is something I will never apologize for.